Welcome. You're listening to Sam and Chris on the Crimson Creed podcast. Chris, how you doing?
I'm pretty well. I'm pretty well. Got to see the Bears return in preseason football today, so that was fun, and I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. We are officially 2 weeks out from the start of the college football season. Nationwide, 3 weeks out from the start of OU's season. Um, Definitely some interesting matchups this year. Knowing that it's going to be the last season of college football as we know it, prior to the massive bits of realignment, the Pac-12 implosion, um, OU and Texas moving to the SEC, so on and so forth, should make for a really interesting year.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be something, especially in the Big 12 title race. Something that OU and Texas fans can actually agree on for once right now is that it would be pretty funny if OU and Texas ended up being the teams in the Big 12 championship this year. I make it a point to never root for Texas, even if my life depends on it. But honestly, I'm kind of rooting for them to make it to the Big 12 championship this year with OU.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm rooting for Texas' success, but I get the spirit of what you're saying. Stick it to the man one more time before we
Most
go.
definitely.
Speaking of going, looking ahead to next year, the first year in the SEC. We're locked tight in battles for a couple of big recruits right now. One of them obviously being Williams Nwaneri, and we've got David Stone in the mix as well. A number of other guys who were pursuing the verbal commitments for going into the 2024 season, and um, obviously hoping to retain them. I know there's been a lot of buzz from the OU recruiting sources saying that uh, the OU staff is feeling confident. They feel like they've got Nwaneri. They're in the driver's seat there, I think is how Parker Thune put it. Um, we've also got, from what I've read at least, we've got a pretty good hold on David Stone's recruitment. There was some smoke about him maybe trying Michigan State. Don't know how true that all is, how much veracity there is in that. And obviously today, looking to 2025, we picked up Nickens, the four-star wide receiver out of Oklahoma City. So that's a big win. What kind of impacts are you hoping to see maybe from this recruiting class that Venables is putting together? This first really, really big, um, highly rated class.
You know, something that I'm really looking to see is, do we have a mean defensive front again? Sometimes I'll go back and I'll watch some highlights from older OU football games, and by older I just mean like earlier this century. And one that I find myself frequenting is the 2003 Bedlam game. Number one, Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State here in Norman. Well, I'd say here in Norman. I'm in Chicago, but you're in Norman. Uh, Number one, OU versus Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State had it fourth and goal, about 2 inches from the goal line. And you hear Brad Nessler doing the commentary on here saying, two determined football teams, one ranked number one in the country with a great defense. And he's clearly describing OU there. Fourth and goal, they hand it off to the fullback or the handoff, and he gets stuffed for a loss. I mean, we had a defensive front that didn't want to give up an inch of territory. And we saw some flashes of what that could be with elite players, excuse me, this past season. Like, look, as weird as this is to say, OU led the country at the end of the regular season in tackles for a loss. That, considering how our defense played the rest of the year, that's kind of a shocking statistic. We also got after the quarterback quite a bit. We generated quite a bit of pressure. Now we've brought in a whole bunch of players through the portal, like Trace Ford, Rondell Bothroyd, just to name a couple, who are going to be adding to that pressure. Only this time they're bringing veteran leadership and experience with them. On top of that, we need to be able to bring in the really high level recruits, the ones that make you say, holy crap, this is a once in a lifetime player. And one of the ones that you mentioned, David Stone, He actually said something today with On Three's Chad Simmons. He was asked where he's leaning in the recruiting process right now, and if I remember correctly, he's committing on August 26th. But he said, and I quote, "As far as pure ball, I feel like OU would probably be the place for me, especially with Coach Venables, Coach Bates, and what they've done with D linemen in the past few years." Excuse me. And if you think about it, Todd Bates and Brent Venables at Clemson created arguably the best defensive line in college football for probably 6 or 7 years. I mean, they know how to bring in the right players and they know how to develop them to where they are ready for the NFL before they're even done with college. So they've done some amazing things there. If we can get David Stone and Williams Nwaneri in on this class, who will be committing this coming Monday, the 14th, that would be really something special. Now, one thing to remember, Nwaneri, his commitment, his decision, it's kind of going back and forth right now. Every day you'll hear a Missouri insider say, this is Missouri's game to lose. And then the next day you'll see an OU insider go, oh, well, Missouri, their traction is stopped. This is Oklahoma's in the driver's seat. And so it seems like this is going back and forth every day. But what I'm really hoping to see out of this class is a mean defensive front. What about you?
I think you're exactly right. I think it's refreshing after the Lincoln Riley era where it was such a focus on the offensive side, which in that respect, have to give credit where it's due. The offense was something special. It was record setting. Um, Under Riley's tenure, we had the likes of Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, um, Jalen Hurts, had a little Spencer Rattler mixed in, along with Caleb Williams there through the 22 season, 21 season, excuse me. It's a nice change of pace because you harken back to the 2003 season there, and 2003, a lot of OU fans, at least myself included, will tell you that's one of the best teams to never win a national championship. That 2003 team, that was such a stacked team. Um, it's a miracle to me. I guess it's more confounding more than anything, um, that team did not pull it off against LSU. Um, yeah, just kind of a mess. But like you said, we've got Rondell Bothroyd coming through, the transfer from Wake Forest. Got Dejon Terry from Tennessee. Got to be a huge win. So we've got a lot to look forward to from the transfer front and from the recruiting front going into 2024. Lots of time to further implement the system that Venables and Bates have going and see what kind of stuff we can pull off. I'm really excited for it. Obviously, Jackson Arnold coming in this year at quarterback is going to be huge on the offensive side. So it's going to be a good thing to see. Jackson Arnold being a freshman, true freshman, that is. We do have some freshmen on the team that are looking to make a meaningful impact on the team and on our season coming into this year. One of them that jumps out for me right off the page is Gavin Sawchuk. I know there's been some recently about maybe an injury here or there, going through practice, trying to make it through that. Just hoping we're going to be able to see him make it through the season, be okay, and be able to contribute. His, a lot of his time last year was not on the field. He played a couple downs, a couple snaps against TCU, obviously. That game didn't turn out so well. But looking past that, the Cheez-It Bowl against Florida State, 15 rushes, 100 yards, 105 yards, and a touchdown in that one. Huge pop right onto the scene, averaging over 5 yards a carry in a bowl game against a Power 5 opponent. It's a shame we couldn't pull that one out, but getting to see some of the younger guys take the helm a little bit and lead us to what was at least a hard fought exit from the season.
And something to remember there was
Pretty
that Florida
exciting.
State didn't have any opt outs. They even had Jared Verse out there, an expected first round pick.
Yeah. Yeah. So Sawchuck is one that jumps off the page immediately for me from the offensive side. What offensive freshman do you have potentially make an impact this season?
So the freshman I'm looking at is a true freshman late enrollee, which normally when you hear that, and Gavin Sawchuk was actually a late enrollee, and because of that, he didn't really get too much play time this year. But there's a lot of hype surrounding this kid, and they're saying that they're expecting him to be getting a bunch of meaningful snaps this year. It's true freshman Jaquez Petaway. He's a excuse me, he's a 5'10", 180 pound, 185 pound freshman. He is a speedster. I remember watching some of his film and seeing some of the stuff that he was capable of, and it's just some outrageous things that he can do out there. He set some track and field records in Texas, and he's taken Marvin Mims' number. He's taken the number 17, so big shoes to fill there. But from what I've been reading about these practices, from what I've been reading about fall camp, it's like he's been there this entire year. It's like he was there in the spring game. It's like he was there in the bowl game last year because he's just fitting in so well to Jeff Levy's system. And not only is he getting play time with Dylan Gabriel, he's getting play time with Jackson Arnold, he's getting play time with Davis Bevel. I mean, he's really seeing a bunch of meaningful time in practice. And having a fast wide receiver who who can consistently catch the ball. Because if there's one thing that we've learned from Brent Venables, it's that he appreciates consistency more than anything. You could run a 5 second 40-yard dash, but if you catch the ball 100% of the time, he's going to put you out there in the starting lineup. From what I understand, Jaquez Petaway has been nothing but consistent, and if we can get that consistency out on the football field, that's going to be a big get for our offense. But I tell you one other thing that I'm waiting to see this year is complementary football. We can have Jaquez Petaway go out there and catch all the 99-yard touchdown passes we want, but as we learned in 2018 and in 2021 and 2017, it only matters so much if you don't have a good defense to go with it. Which brings me to a true freshman on the defensive side that I'm really excited to see this year. That is true freshman defensive lineman PJ Adebawara. He he is a monster. He's a true freshman who's 6'4" and 241 pounds. He was according to 24/7 Sports, the number 9 player overall in the entire country coming
Five
into the
star, I might
2023
add.
class. 5 star, yeah, consensus 5 star on all services. And I've been reading, I can't remember what service it was specifically. I want to say it was On Three or Rivals, but one of the services out there, they were talking about true freshmen that are entering this year and talking about whether or not they'd be able to start or if they'd just see some play time or if they'd mainly be bench warmers. This was before fall camp. This was early summer, and they said PJ Adebawara is arguably one of the best defensive linemen we've had come through in a long time. They said he is just an unreal talent. Some of the stuff I've heard and read about him is that as good as Obo Okoronkwo was, as good as Eric Stryker was, as good as Nick Benito was, apparently the three of them don't hold a candle to what PJ Adebawara is doing right now. And and almost every service I'm reading is saying that it's going to be hard to keep him off the field. A big pass rusher like that who shows skills of being able to get to the quarterback, that's something that we've desperately been needing because, like I mentioned last year, we put pressure on the quarterback, but we didn't actually bring him down too much. One other thing about him is I remember seeing a picture of him at the spring game standing next to a few players. He honestly looks like Will Anderson out there. Will Anderson, of course, being the first round pick to the Texans out of Alabama this past year, and he was just a monster. If you put the two of them side by side, it's hard to tell them apart. I mean, he is just a monster of a person. And if you combine that with going up with training against the best offensive lineman in the country, Bill Bedenbaugh, he always gets our offensive linemen to a high level. You put someone of his caliber and make him train against that caliber of offensive line, we have a real good chance of having some complimentary football out there.
Yeah. No, you're hitting that right on the money. Peyton Bowen too on the defensive side. Um, They're in our secondary coming out of Denton Guyer. Huge get for us. And obviously, it's been a little bit since our last podcast, but during that time, having the Peyton Bowen recruitment, having a lot of this other stuff go on that was really pretty crazy, pretty dramatic. And the ability of the Venables led staff to haul in Peyton Bowen, lure him away from Oregon, from Notre Dame, whether or not he was ever really going there, it's academic, who knows? But we got him at the end of the day. Really exciting addition, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that one pans out as time goes. A lot of those recruits we talked about were for 2024, obviously, and we're headed to the SEC in 24. I don't know about you, but I am pretty excited for that. We're going to get a chance for some great games, having Alabama and, if I'm not mistaken, having Tennessee at home as well, here in Norman. It's going to be a heck of a game, heck of a season. I think the one I'm looking forward to most is OU on the road to Auburn. We think of Auburn, going to Jordan O'Hare, and it's the quintessential SEC environment. Just very rich tradition. It's crazy loud. It's hard to hear in there for a lot of people. Obviously, the Kick Six Iron Bowl, that was there a number of years back, probably about a decade ago now, 11 years maybe. But Kick Six was there. We've had lots of crazy, out of this world moments in that stadium, and getting to go there in our first season in the SEC. Going to be a big challenge. Going to be a challenge for our guys to be playing there, because as solid as some of the environments are in the Big 12, it's not what the SEC is not going to be what we're used to in that regard in terms of the environment. So going to be a big one. Do you have any games you're particularly looking forward to in our inaugural SEC season?
That's one of them. And for that same reason, at Jordan Hare Stadium, that they're going to give you their best, especially if it's a primetime game. I mean, look at the Iron Bowl over the past few times that it's been there. It's been a doozy of a game every time. 10 years ago, like you mentioned, the Kick Six, Auburn wins 34-28. In 2015, Alabama had a pretty good handle on that game. They won 29-13. But then 2 years later, in the 2017 season, Auburn dominates Alabama for a 26-14 victory. 2 years later, when Tua Tagovailoa was out and Mac Jones was playing in his place, they went to the Iron Bowl at Jordan Hare. They lost 48-45. Alabama did, and it was a missed field goal that ended up costing Alabama the game in that one. 2 years later, 2021, you get that amazing drive from Bryce Young at the end of the game. But that being said, 2 minutes left in the game, it was 10-3 Auburn, and that was not a good Auburn team going up against an Alabama team that played for a national championship that year. Now, the final score was 24-22 in Alabama's favor, but that wasn't before, like I said, a bad Auburn team sent them to 4 overtimes. So that when you go to Jordan Hare, you are going to be getting their best. You're going to be getting their best. They're doing all types of things. A couple of the games I'm really looking forward to, like you mentioned, Tennessee at home, the return of Josh Heupel to Norman. That's going to be fun to watch, and hopefully we're at that. Excuse me, we're at a higher level where we can really compete with their explosive offense. South Carolina is also coming back with Shane Beamer returning to Norman. Spencer Rattler will be out of the picture at that point. I kind of wish we could see him come to Norman as an opponent, but can't always get what you want there. But
one thing he knows he won't hear coming back here is that we want Caleb.
Honestly, and there's one other game that I'm really hoping ends up being a night game, because it's just a terrifying environment, and that's at LSU. It's called Death Valley for a reason. The best of the best go out there and play at night, and they struggle. That's one of the most intimidating crowds in all of college football. So those are all games I'm really looking forward to in our first year in the SEC.
is there anything that draws you in, like OU football in the SEC or OU football in general? Because for me, there's not much really that's close. NFL playoffs are great. Some of um, the late fall, early winter TV rotation is solid. It's not, it's not 5-star television, 2.5, 3-star television, but you catch a dead night between football games or something. College season's up, NFL season is um, in the home stretch of the regular season. Um, does anything captivate your interest quite like OU football?
No, not really. And I'll give you an example here, or I'll give you a metaphor, I guess I should say. I am a big Star Wars nerd, and my darling fiance Hannah is she likes Star Wars, but she also really loves Star Trek. There's this one show that she likes called Star Trek Voyager, and I'll admit it's a good show. Started airing in the late '90s and finished in the early 2000s. But there was one time I was watching that show with her, and I hadn't watched Star Wars in a while, and it took me about like a season and a half to 2 seasons for me to go, wow, this is actually a really good show. I'm beginning to enjoy this. And then part of me was wondering, am I actually a Trekkie? But then I I watched Star Wars, and 5 minutes in, I realized how much better Star Wars is. And so it's the same way with OU football for me. I love the Chicago Bears. I love football up here. I like some of the sitcoms you see in the fall. But OU football, it doesn't hold a nothing holds a candle to OU football. Nothing.
Yeah. Well, looking ahead to this season, 2023, we start the year off with Arkansas State, bringing them to Norman. Myself, looking at this, I'm seeing a pretty easy win. I compare this game kind of to Kent State from last season. Similar caliber of opponent, likely. What I'm hoping to see this year, Dillon Gabriel, it's going to be his second season with Oklahoma in Jeff Lebby's system at Oklahoma, and hoping that there's some added, some learning that's taken place, I guess, since last year, by him, by the rest of the offensive staff on how they really can work better together. So I'm hoping to see Dillon Gabriel and the rest of the offense capitalize on key plays. Kent State last year, we didn't score till maybe a minute and a half left in the first half. That was our first points of the game. Pretty unheard of for OU. So I'd like to see us start taking advantage of things. Dillon Gabriel hit the open shots when he throws them. And I want to see a cohesive defensive line. Let's see if we can get some pressure on the quarterback. Granted, it's going to be Arkansas State, a weak opponent,
Completely agree.
but just want to see if we can at least get something going there. Obviously, having the experienced wide receiver core now with Drake Stoops, we've got Andrew Anthony from Michigan, transferred in from Michigan. We got Jalil Farouk, Austin Stogner's returned to Oklahoma, playing the tight
Brennan
end
Thompson
position.
from Texas.
Yeah, yeah. So we've got a solid group. What are your thoughts on the opener, and how's our season going to turn out?
So I'm looking for all the same things you are there. I'm hoping to see real improvement from Dillon Gabriel because he was a good quarterback in getting us the lead, but he never went down and won us the game. I want to see him go down there and win us the game, whether that's in the first quarter or the fourth. I want to see him just take control of the game. But I also want to see a blowout. A team with OU's pedigree going up against a team like Arkansas State. Of course, they are a Division One team and they have Division One players on their team. You should never discount an opponent. But a team like OU, you really want to see them go out and just blow a team out like this. And so I'm hoping to see that. But also from the backups, I want to see the regular playbook. Last year, if you remember correctly, the first 2 or 3 games of the season, we put our backups in every one of them. And I was complaining, saying, we're just running it up the middle every time. We don't know what's going to happen if they have to throw the ball in a game. We don't know what happens if Dillon Gabriel will go down. Well, Dillon Gabriel went down and the offense couldn't function. We just could not function, as the game against Texas showed us. So when the backups go out there, if the backups go out there, I'd like to see the regular playbook run so we can make sure our offense is capable of more than just first half performance. So I think we're going to win that one pretty soundly. I'm guessing around the 48-10 range for a final score. And for the season, I think it'll all depend on how our defense can do. If our defense can stop the run and if our defense can get more pressure on the quarterback, I think we win 10 or 11 games this year easily. We have the offense to go out and do it, but we need to step it up on the defensive side. So if we can really step it up on the defense with Brent Venables and Todd Bates and Ted Roof under their second year, I think we have a good chance of making it to the conference championship. I don't see us making it to the playoff this year, but I think we have a good chance of making it to and even maybe winning the Big 12 in our last season in there. What about you?
Yeah, I've got us at 10-2. And I think what the season's going to come down to is, can we win the close games? Having so many of those losses last year decided by a possession, it was kind of crazy, really, seeing that happen. So I think it comes down to, do we win the close games? And if we win the close games, I think we're 10-2 when it's all said and done. Ever since 2008, we'll say 2008, we have a repeated history of dropping at least one game in the season that we shouldn't drop. I see maybe us dropping a game to Cincinnati. Cincinnati is, they're here now. We're going to be going to Cincinnati this season, and it's a good group of guys we got. I know from experience the last 14 or so seasons now, these kind of games sneak up on you. And I don't see it being Iowa State this year, especially if they're not going to have a quarterback. And looking at the rest of the schedule, I don't really know who else it would be that would necessarily be one of those trap games that we should win, but drop. So I've got Cincinnati there, and I think Texas, we come close to putting the pieces back together. I don't know that it's fully there yet to knock off Texas when they're coming off the high from the 49-0 win last year. But I'll say that one, I hope I'm wrong. I want to see Texas squashed this year. Maybe
I'd like to see
go
us win
there
50-0. Just one more point to what they did to us last year.
Yeah. But I think we get a realistic shot at the Big 12 and a New Year's Six bowl.
Definitely.
Also, for any Auburn fans, I did say Jordan O'Hare earlier. Chris is in Chicago, getting the airport stadium tied together. Jordan Hare Stadium. So just want to get that in before we finish up. We will be here every weekend through the season, dropping the new podcast. Make sure to follow the Crimson Creed Facebook and Twitter or X feeds, whatever Elon's calling it now.
And Soonerpocket.com.
Soonerpocket.com. Yes, sir. Well, Chris, it's been good getting back with you. Definitely looking forward to seeing how the season goes along, what we can close out. But until next time, Sam and Chris on the Crimson Creed podcast. Good night.
See you Friday.